Tonight on Politics Unplugged, Governor Ducey and other state leaders sounding the alarm about the pandemic's impact on mental health, particularly on our youth. So what resources are available? We're talking to an expert. And Kanye West's attempt to run for president here in Arizona goes all the way to the state Supreme Court. We have the details on why Yeezy will not be on the ballot. But first, on the opening weekend of the NFL season, are Democrats at the state capitol spiking the football too early after adopting a majority mindset heading into the November election? Good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. This week, 3 Democrats at the State House announced their intention to run for leadership roles as Speaker, Majority Leader, and the Majority Whip, despite Democrats not holding a majority in the State House of Representatives. Now, here's a look at the balance of power right now. Currently, Republicans hold a slim 2-seat majority in the Arizona House, and Democrats think that they have a good chance to flip the chamber blue in November. Now, these are the 3 Democrats announcing their plans to run for leadership in what they hope is a majority party come 2021. State Representatives Diego Espinoza, Jennifer Logden, along with State Senator Andrea D'Alessandro. Now, she's running for the House in the fall. She's currently a state senator. And joining me now is the State Representative Diego Espinoza. Thank you for taking some time to join us here today. And I got to start with the first basic question. You guys spiking the football too early?
No, sir. It's not early enough. Matter of fact, it's important. We have a very monumental task ahead of us. And with that being said, it takes a lot of preparation to ensure that we are prepared and ready to govern.
Yeah, and let's start here. Let's get into this, because you also released kind of a statement out there about your intentions. Should you guys, A, take the House, and B, should your colleagues vote you guys into leadership? Now, let's start a little bit. It sounds like if you guys take over, you're going to be advocating for people's taxes to go up. And I'm citing here, particularly on your talk about the economy, you want to require that wealthy individuals pay their collective share, as well as corporations. And this is going to you say enable the business climate here to thrive. So is that a fair statement that tax is going to be going up under Democrats?
Not necessarily true. I think we have to look at all avenues, looking at our tax structure and see where we have opportunities to make adjustments accordingly, understanding that we have major issues with infrastructures that we need to address, education, healthcare, and a variety of other issues rise to the top that are very important. And with that being said, that requires resources, not to mention the fact that we are under very uncertain times with COVID. And with that being said, what additional resources will we require moving forward?
Yeah, you say not necessarily that taxes will be going up, but how do you plan to accomplish? This is a very comprehensive, policy paper that you guys put up, and a lot of it is about increasing resources to healthcare, to education. How do you do that without raising taxes?
Well, we could do that in several ways. We can obviously, there are opportunities within the past that have had tax breaks. We could also revisit those items. We can do tax moratoriums. And there are a few other ideas I think we have, but I think the best part of it is we're putting a plan out there, and having opportunity to have stakeholders get involved is extremely important, and how we can best accommodate those efforts to ensure that we are, in the end, serving our constituents in the state of Arizona.
And sticking kind of with the economic theme here, one of your policies out there you've listed here is fair labor laws. Could you explain that a little bit more? Because if you read this, it sounds like there may be some items in your platform that maybe empowers unions here in the state as well, as much as possible.
Well, again, understanding that we have fair treatment laws for our individuals here that are working and conducting business in Arizona, ensuring that our workers are very well protected in the workspace. And so, again, addressing those issues, again, with our business community is important, ensuring that we have healthcare and ensuring that we have wages that support everyday Arizonans, again, to break out of the middle class and ensuring that they have a great opportunity of economic success moving forward. Again, that will help them pay for schooling, education, again, for their children. And healthcare is extremely important again. And how could we avoid those things, especially now with COVID directly in our face, is how are we going to address that? And having fair labor laws, I think, is important, ensuring that we can ensure that every Arizonan, at the end of the day, could be successful.
All right, and also want to move on. You've got to hear, you want to talk a little bit about racial justice. I want to read just this sentence here from your paper. It says, "We continue to see racism in all its forms play out across the country and our state. There are people in positions of power and influence who see minority communities as a threat to our way of life, instead as seeing us as neighbors." How does that translate into policy? Are you guys, pushing for, criminal justice reform? Are you talking about, those types of issues, defunding the police? We've seen that movement play out across the country, and qualified immunity for police officers. Are you talking about addressing those issues, and how would you do that?
Absolutely. A matter of fact, in the document, what we spelled out is a living document, one that would actually breed information to be coming in from those individuals for stakeholders to ensure that we're addressing those issues. I come from a small city in Tolleson and served as a city council member. And at the city council level, I can assure you that we were addressing any issues that were facing our police departments. And we need to be doing this at a statewide level. I also served on the earned release credit program that was chaired by one of our Republican colleagues. And we didn't do enough. And we're failing everyday Arizonans on doing so, to addressing those issues, ensuring that we have policing matters that are addressed and that is reflective of our constituents.
Also here, you've talked a little bit about reproductive rights. Now, there is no other issue that I can think of at the legislature where Democrats, Republicans see very differently here. Now, obviously, Republicans have controlled the legislature for a long time here in Arizona. We have, some very restrictive abortion rights laws here in the state. Specifically, I'm thinking that you're probably talking about repealing some of these abortion laws that have been passed in recent years. Is that accurate? And particularly, which laws would you want to repeal?
Again, it's important in the document that we've shared is that we would like stakeholder input, meeting with our members of our elected office, our body, as well as over in the Senate, to ensure that we are doing the best for Arizonans. And if that's going to take on the topic of women's rights, I have been for women's rights, and I stand for that. And again, I think having these conversations, again, that's spelled out in the document, is to have an open dialogue and see where we have opportunities to pass to ensure that we are protecting women.
All right.
And families.
That is all the time we have. Thank you, Diego Espinoza. Thank you very much for joining us here on Politics Unplugged today.
Thank you, Dennis.
So while we have prioritized suicide prevention strategies over the past few years, the impact of COVID-19 makes it more important than ever. It's important to stay socially connected.
We all have a role to play in preventing suicide.
Americans reporting symptoms of depression registered a threefold jump compared to before the pandemic. These aren't just statistics, they represent people in our lives. Our parents, our kids, our friends.
One loss of life to suicide is one too many.
And these days, our focus is on physical health because of the coronavirus. But this week, Governor Ducey, along with health and education leaders, were focused on a different type of health, mental health. Now, for many of us, the pandemic has taken a toll on our mental health, and state officials want everyone to know there is help available, especially for our youth. Governor Ducey revealed suicide is the leading cause of death for kids ages 10 to 14 in our state. We also learned that 15,000 Arizona students assessed mental health services last year. This is a 28% increase from the year before. The Crisis Response Network also saw an 11% increase from July to August in youth calls for crisis needs. And joining me now is Justin Chase from the Crisis Response Network about some of the help available. And Jason, we've heard some really grim statistics coming from the governor yesterday, from Kara Chris, the state health director, regarding some of our youth. Some of those numbers are just kind of amazing and really depressing, especially when you think about the number one cause of death for kids ages 10 to 14 years old happens to be suicide. Now, what kinds of calls are you getting from youth on your network right now? Why do you think we've seen such increases?
Yeah, there's a lot of stress and anxiety going on. Our anxiety-related calls are up. We typically associate depression with suicidal thoughts, but anxiety is also a very high risk factor. So a lot of the uncertainty and unknown, and as the coronavirus drags on, the pandemic here, that stress and anxiety continues to grow. Risk factors, especially for youth, is related to isolation. Feelings of hopelessness and helplessness are paramount indicators for risk. And with that isolation comes the increase in suicidal harm thoughts and actions.
All right. Now, what kind of coping strategies could you offer people out there who may be watching this right now, and they're feeling down, they're not feeling very well right now? What are some coping strategies you might suggest, not just for kids, but even adults who are struggling through this pandemic and all the stress it is putting on their lives?
Yeah, really being able to find a trusted individual that you can confide in and talk to about these thoughts and feelings. Getting outside, going for a walk, getting out into nature are all really good indicators. Physical activity where we can get increase the brain activity is really beneficial to helping individuals. So those are great coping mechanisms, is really just getting out, getting a little bit of physical activity, and talking with a person we can confide in.
Now, I think it's also important to kind of go over as well, what kinds of signs should parents be looking for with their children? What kind of signs should people be looking for their friends, for their family members? At what point should they think of intervening here and talking to them?
Yeah, so general changes in behavior, either increased anxiety, increased depression, increased use of substances, alcohol, drugs, other self-destructive behaviors. They start talking about or start trying to give away belongings, things that are important to them, talking about their what the world will be like after they're gone. Having those types of conversations can be risk factors for suicidal thoughts and harm.
All right, and one final question here I want to ask, how important is it for people who have any of these thoughts to be able to reach out to someone, have someone easily accessible? And I'm asking this question because I know here in the state, the state, at least in its K-12 schools, they don't have a lot of school counselors, or at least the ratio here in the state is among the worst here in the country. Is it important, at least for when you're dealing with these kids, to have people on these campuses who can identify these students and be there for them to talk to?
As we've seen, we saw a decrease in calls related to youth because schools closed. So being able to have access to trusting adults and individuals you can confide in, so teachers, counselors, school resource officers, other administrators are all great resources to have. And then having programs like Teen Lifeline or services like Crisis Response Network available for individuals to reach out to when they're having big feelings and thoughts that impact their mental health.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Justin, for taking some time to join us here today. And if you need help, or a loved one needs some help, the Crisis Response Network is available 24/7, and it is free. The number is on your screen, 602-222-9444.
There are going to be ballots floating around and collected. And so that opens up the possibility of fraud.
And next on Politics Unplugged, U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr in Arizona this week, trumpeting the president's claims of voter fraud linked to mail-in ballots.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
Plus, local reaction to President Trump's interview with the legendary investigative journalist Bob Woodward. That's all next when Politics Unplugged returns. And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. The state Supreme Court decided this week that hip-hop star Kanye West cannot appear on the ballot. The ruling confirms a lower court decision to toss West off the ballot after an Arizona man claimed he was not qualified to run as an independent because he is registered Republican. Earlier this month, West's campaign turned in nearly 58,000 nominating signatures, well over the 39,000 needed to appear on the Arizona ballot.
It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. People don't realize we lose 25,000, 30,000 people a year here. Who would ever think that, right? This is more deadly. This is 5 per. This is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff. Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
Sure, I want you to.
I wanted to I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes,
because I don't want to create a panic.
Play it down. That's what President Trump told legendary investigative journalist Bob Woodward during a series of interviews for his new book, Rage, which is set to come out later this month. Arizona members of Congress are reacting on Twitter. All of them are Democrats. Ruben Gallego tweeted, "A leader can keep people calm and safe while communicating honestly. What is the situation? We have young men and women in uniform doing that every day. The president could have led. Instead, he lied to save himself, not the country." Now, Greg Stanton tweeted, "Yes, this is shocking, but it is not surprising. The president will do anything to hold on to power." Now, all of Washington is buzzing about this Woodward book and about the audio tapes. The president took the opportunity to change the narrative. He just released a list of judges he would consider to be a Supreme Court justice. One of the names on that list is someone with deep Arizona ties.
The 20 additions I am announcing today would be jurists in the mold of Justices Antonin Scalia, Clarence Thomas, and Samuel Alito. Their names are as follows: BRIDGET, BADE of Arizona, judge on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Now, here's a quick look of Judge BADE. She was born in Phoenix. She got her law degree at ASU back in 1990. Her federal career includes work as a judge in the U.S. District Court here in Arizona. And she currently serves as a judge on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, where she was appointed by President Trump. She's now on a long list of judges the president says he would consider appointing to the Supreme Court. If he does that, she would be the second Arizona judge nominated to the High Court, the other, of course, being Sandra Day O'Connor.
The mailing out universally of ballots, what I've said is that opens the floodgate to potential fraud and coercion, and has always been recognized as creating those significant risks. And I would ask people to think about why we vote today the way we vote. Why do we have specific polling places that your name's on a list, you show up, you identify yourself, you go behind a curtain, no one else is allowed to be with you, and you cast your vote to assure secrecy of the ballot? And those measures have developed over the years because of precisely concerns of fraud and coercion.
United States Attorney General William Barr was in Phoenix this week to announce the results of an operation aimed at disrupting drug traffickers. Barr also addressed other issues, including the 2020 election. Barr doubled down on claims of voting by mail could lead to fraud. Our Republican Governor, Doug Ducey, responded.
Arizona's been doing this since 1992. This is nearly 2 decades, 20 years, with improvements and reforms every year. This is one of the most important things that any state government does, and Arizona does it very well.
Now, in Arizona, mail-in voting has become increasingly popular over the years. In fact, of the 4 million registered voters, the Secretary of State's office tells me 3 million are on the state's permanent early voting list, meaning they automatically get a ballot in the mail. As far as voting fraud, there's little evidence, or no evidence really, of widespread problems here in the state. Our Attorney General's office here in Arizona has said they prosecuted about 20 cases over the past 10 years. And I'm bringing in our panel next to talk about all of this week's major headlines, including a new poll showing just how close President Trump and Joe Biden are among Arizona voters. That's next on Politics Unplugged. And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. It looks more and more likely that the road to the White House runs right through Arizona. The latest poll coming from Morning Consult showing Biden up 3 points. There have been a number of polls over the summer showing former Vice President with a lead over President Trump here in Arizona. The president's campaign is saying they are in a good spot, so good, in fact, that they feel that they could take an unusual step, as reports last week detailed how President Trump is pulling his TV ads here in Arizona, at least on a temporary basis. Right now, it is time to talk it out. And I am joined by Republican consultant Marcus DelArtino and Democrat Roy Herrera. Let's go ahead. Let's start with that poll. Let's start with you, Marcus. A lot of polls out there. Do you take this one any more seriously than any others? And do you think this is a good sign for the Trump campaign here?
Dennis, I'm having a tough time taking any of these polls seriously because it's just a continual dump of information in Arizona, and everybody who wants to be a pollster is somehow releasing their numbers to the media. That being said, what you do is you look at the totality of the polls, and there certainly tends to be a trend here if you look at the totality of the numbers. I do agree that the president it is a tight race in Arizona, and it's up for grabs. This one, of course, is within the margin of error. So it points to what we all know. It will be a tight race in Arizona.
But, you know, you say it's a tight race, and let's go to Roy here. People in tight races, candidates in tight races, do they pull their TV ads, at least even if it's temporary? This seems like a crucial time as we're just weeks away from early ballots dropping here in Arizona, and the president's campaign has decided to go dark here.
That's right. I mean, I think it was a very curious decision, and it's interesting to me. We've seen some reporting that, you know, perhaps the Trump campaign may be having some money problems here, that they've already spent, you know, so much of the money, that, you know, close to $1 billion he's raised. And so, you know, it's curious to me that you would pull out of a swing state right before early voting and more money in other places. I think that's obviously a good sign for the Biden campaign here in Arizona, because he's able to sort of dominate the airwaves here, but it is highly unusual. To Marcus's point, I think we've seen polling, you know, vary a bit here, but I think most of the polling still shows that, you know, Joe Biden has a, you know, single-digit lead here, and polling has shown, you know, kind of different things about whether it's tightened or not since the conventions. But I think that's the sort of state of play. I think it's going to be close no matter what because of how polarized things are. But I think right now Biden is ahead.
And Marcus, you know, with those revelations, you know, from the Bob Woodward, the tapes that are being released right now, where the president says he always wanted to downplay this virus, that he didn't want to create a panic, is that going to have an effect here in Arizona? Obviously, there's no polling right now measuring the effect of those tapes. But when the latest polls do come out, the next round of polls come out, do you expect to see a change here because of these tapes?
Will the tapes have an effect? Certainly, I find it questionable that Bob Woodward held on to them since February and dumps them now, by the way. But, you know, undoubtedly they will have an effect. But there are other factors at play here, Dennis, that also have an effect. We saw some violence at Tempe Mills Mall this week, where some racial tensions overflowed and some people got severely hurt. To the extent that the mainstream media picks up on those news stories, that has an effect as well. So for every possibility, for every news story, I guess, or news cycle where there is something that'll move the numbers, there's also the potential for the news cycle to switch and for it to switch the other way. All right. And Roy, I want to kind of switch gears here. I want to talk about the other big race here in the state. That's the U.S. Senate race between Democrat Mark Kelly and the Republican incumbent Martha McSally. Now, this week, we saw that some video of Mr. Kelly making a racist joke. 2 years ago, he was joking about his brother and some of the physiological changes that he underwent when he was up in space for a year. I'm not going to go through the joke, not going to repeat the joke, but you're aware of this. Is this going to have an effect on Kelly moving forward?
Well, I think Mark Kelly did the right thing. He immediately apologized. He expressed, you know, regret over the joke, and hopefully, you know, that will be the end of it. We can sort of focus on the real issues like COVID response, like the economy, like healthcare costs. You know, certainly I've seen some folks on the Republican side on Twitter and whatnot try to bring this up as an issue, and maybe they'll try to do that. But certainly, you know, Mark has acknowledged his error here and expressed regret over the joke.
All right, we're going to have to wrap it up right there. But before we go, just want to give our shout out to our longtime producer of the show, Sean Olstad. This is his last show. We want to wish him the very best as he moves forward in his career. And that is all the time we have tonight. But be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged.